Hello and welcome back. You are now watching the sixth episode of Consult Mansi web series, a series dedicated exclusively to the field of communication that touches upon journalism, PR, advertising, and marketing, which obviously includes digital media. I'm your host Mansi. I'm a communication specialist, a consultant, coach, and a speaker. I'm also a guest faculty in a couple of colleges for digital media and journalism. Now, before we start this episode, I would like to make it very clear that this is not a paid episode and doesn't sell any product or service. The content is the IP of Consult Mansi. The content should not be reproduced for commercial purposes or otherwise, either partly or in full. Also, the opinions discussed during the course of this episode are purely that of the guest on the show and does not necessarily reflect on that of Consult Mansi's culture, workings, vision, or mission. With that, let's start today's episode. We all know that data is very important in the digital world. That's something that I have been dwelling on for a long time now. And considering today's scenario, we also know that voice, video, and vernacular are the three important things that's going to drive digital media. AI is creeping into all these. Facebook can recognize your photos as soon as you upload it, and it helps you tag people. Google Maps can change things and give you different routes. So many other things. How? All because of AI. So what inspires me for today's episode is an email that I got on June 4th. I attended one of the webinars and there was a quick email that said, you have attended this webinar. If you are in this field and we as a company are also into this field, would you like to talk? I was like, wow, because most webinars are definitely selling something, but at the end of it, they say, please fill up this form and we will get in touch with you. But this was different. And then I followed this person who sent me an email. I set up Google Alerts and I found out a lot about her. She's a foodie. She loves to read and travel. She was with Tata Group and had a short stint with the KPMG. Yes, I followed her on all the webinars she did after that. She holds a postgraduate degree from London Business School, specializing in leadership, finance, and marketing. What intrigued me about her was that what is her company doing? What is she doing in her company? So I followed her on a couple of webinars and I found this really, really interesting. So today, let's welcome our guest. For this episode, it is none other than the co-founder and the head of marketing of Mailin Foundry, Miss Aditi Olevan. Hello, Aditi. Welcome.
Hi, Mansi. So good to speak to you. And we've been in touch for a while. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very happy to be part of your program.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you made time for me, Aditi. Okay, without much ado, what I've done is I've divided this into different sections. So obviously, like me, all the viewers will want to know a little more about you. But before that, I think I want to touch upon the industry as such. So I'm going to just start shooting questions. Okay, the pandemic times have seen a paradigm shift in content consumption. So firstly, what I want to understand is what sort of content are people actually consuming today when it comes to the genre or the format? Okay, what exactly is the trend?
Right. So, Mansi, I'm a firm believer that the pandemic has accelerated a lot of things that have been happening. But all of these things have been happening for a while, and it's not so. It's not a temporary change that's going to revert, right? I think the biggest change is the flexibility and the ability for users to choose the kind of content they want to watch, when they want to watch, right? What kind of context they are in when they're watching, right? And I think that gives the ability for a lot of different genres, a lot of different formats of content to coexist, right? I mean, think about a daily journey of you as a consumer, right? You as a video viewer, right? There'll be times when you'll be browsing through social media and you'll be going through short format content because you're trying to relax, but you don't have too much time to go deep into a content, right? And there are other times where on a weekend you're sitting, you want to kick back and relax and you want to watch a good show or even a good movie, right? So I do not think that it's one kind of genre or format which is the trend. I think the trend is that there is a lot of different genres and formats that are coming up, and there's a lot more room for experimentation that's happening. Having said that, of course, there's always any new change brings positives, but also brings certain cons. I think the biggest one is the fact that it's very, very difficult to keep the interest and attention of the viewer for too long, right? Because they have so much choice and so many different kinds of content, so many different platforms available, they can switch very easy, right? So people are becoming fickle in terms of what they want to watch, and what they want to follow, right? So I think those are the two major trends. So and both of them stem from the fact that there is variety and there is an ability to give that variety. Think about when when I was growing up, the prime time, the 9 to 10 p.m. Time in the family was always a time of heated debate. What do you want to watch? Dad wants to watch news. Mom wants to watch some sort of a show, right? But today you can actually do both if you want, because there's also the ability to watch individual. The content has come to individual screens, so you have the flexibility of watching it as a family, watching it as an individual, watching it with friends, depending on the kind of devices you're watching it on, right? So there's so much flexibility available. I think that's the biggest trend that I see, and the pandemic has only accelerated that because we are all at home, so we want to watch a lot more content and we have a lot more choice. So I think that's what I would think is the biggest trend that I can see.
Wow, that's a touch upon reality. That's exactly what is happening today. So,
Yes.
so now that you've spoken about the viewer's point of view, I'm thinking about the digital marketer's point of view. After
Yeah.
a decade, finally, after a decade of me getting into this, finally, I'm seeing that
Hmm.
there's emphasis firstly on data-driven decisions and arriving at meaningful insights, and also
Hmm.
secondly on consumer psychology itself. So people want to
Right.
give that a try. Okay, so have you also
Hmm.
seen this shift, and why do you think it's happening? I mean, data I can understand, but why consumer psychology? So you see this shift happening?
Absolutely. And I think data is an enabler for that. Just uh, Even AI, for example, you touched upon AI, and we'll speak more about it. Data, AI, all of these are enablers, right? And consumer psychology is very, very central to selling, right? Understanding your consumer or your customer. So, if it's a B2C, it's a consumer, but if it's a B2B, even understanding your customer is important, right? So I think data is enabling that much better. I really like this one example where in a webinar I was with a few panel members, and one of the panel members from a very very popular content production or content sort of platform talked about how they experiment with what people would like by actually putting out short format content on social media to test out if that story will work, to test out if those actors would work, and then they decide to invest in a longer format, which would be a lot of investment, a lot of time, effort, right? I think the biggest thing that data and digital has enabled in case of consumer psychology is the ability to understand the psychology and make quicker decisions, right? Which was far more difficult. I mean, imagine, again, taking the example of broadcast industry because I understand OTT and M&E better. Think about how decisions were taken. I mean, you had to look at TRP, which is not necessarily a marker of what each and every individual is thinking, right? It was a metric used by selectively sort of looking at a few numbers from individuals who are specifically giving feedback, right? So imagine from there, now you are at a level where you can actually figure out what is each person looking at, right? What is popular? How many views are you getting? It's so much more data availability makes it so much better to understand your consumer, right? So I do think that they are interlinked. I don't think data science and digital and consumer psychology are two mutually exclusive things. I think data and digital is the enabler for consumer psychology. So I think that's the reason why we see so much more focus on using data to get better, decision making on the consumer.
Aditi, could you please elaborate on the consumer cohorts in the because that's the emerging trend, right? Like you touched upon it.
Right.
So I want to
Yeah.
understand that consumer cohorts from a psychographics perspective for the digital
Mhm.
marketers.
Right. Right. So of course, cohort creation is again a very very fundamental thing that people do as marketeers, and it's really important, right? Building a persona, building a cohort, and I'm pretty sure even your audience has done a lot of work in this area, and they understand how to build cohorts. I think what I want to talk about is how I think a lot of that will evolve, right? I do think that a cohort is going to keep getting smaller and smaller, because earlier what happens is, again, a lot of things about the consumer is unknown. So you're taking a lot of hypotheses, so your cohorts are bigger, right? I'll take an example. I mean, we fundamentally, everybody uses SEC, right, a social economic class, as a metric to define, especially for consumer goods, right, and similar retail goods, right. But imagine if you look at SEC, somebody who's an SECA today, you actually have the ability to break it down far more, right? There'll be so many people. We use the terminology double income, no kids, right? So a lot of people who have a lot of disposable income, because they come under SSEA, but they also are very different in many ways. They probably don't want to spend on assets. Maybe they want to travel way more, right? So all of these decisions are becoming easier because, again, you have more information about the user. So I think the more we progress into data driven decision making, the smaller the cohorts will become. And finally, we are basically going towards hyper personalization. Now, a point where we won't need cohorts because we know exactly what is every individual user doing or individual consumer doing, and what should we accordingly serve to them, right, as a company. So I think that's the trend, and again, AI will play a very important role there. Of course, AI is one element. The very fact that there is big data, the ability to manage that level of data, right? I mean, imagine every user. If there's an OTT platform which has 100 million users, the ability to understand, track, and provide that value to an individual user will require the infrastructure to support that, right? But I do think that's going to happen. I do think the cohort is going to get smaller and smaller, and hyper personalization is going to happen. And I know it's a cliched word, or a lot of these terminologies are used a lot. But what I am trying to mean here is the ability to not just know how to put a person in a cohort or in a group, but actually to figure out what is that individual doing, right? All of us think of ourselves as individuals. We don't think of ourselves as cohorts, right? We don't think of ourselves as a group of people. Of course, there are similarities we will have, but if there's an ability to know how am I different from you, how are you different from your neighbor, right? That is going to be very powerful, and I think that's the direction that data is going to drive cohorts.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I still remember that, when Geo launched, and that was like way back, and then we had to do targeting, and as you said, more to do with SEC, and we had always excluded certain products from being advertised to Geo customers. And then when we
Right.
started doing the cohort segmentation, we realized that, no, somehow the other SEC people are also fitting into the Geo part. And then we realized how people are using Geo connections as a secondary connections for internet connection. So I think
Okay.
that
I
that
did that too, by the way.
so that gave a lot of insights into this.
Yeah.
So data, yes, data and cohorts has always given us segmentation wise. I mean, it's given us so much insights that it's a learning. Every time I have tried something like that, it's always been a learning for me. Um, Aditi, now moving on to the video part of it, what I found was OTT obviously has seen a growth, a huge spurt in the last quarter. So, if somebody wants to advertise in the OTT space, okay,
Mhm.
what is your top three advices to somebody who wants to market, who is looking at advertising, who wants to look at OTT platform as a medium of communication for their brands?
Right. I think I have one key advice, and that is, while it's a great platform to experiment, and it's a platform where you have to be because that's where everybody is. It's also important to remember the fundamentals. Often, what happens is when there's a new platform or new form of advertising that comes in, right? Everybody scrambles for it, and then the fundamentals are forgotten, right? Fundamentals of figuring out what is your viewer watching, or what is your target user doing, and when would they want to watch this, right? I'll give an example. So yesterday I actually got two extremes of what I really liked as an advertising in an OTT platform, and what I absolutely hated, right? So when I say OTT in this case, actually, I mean digital, because the second example I'm going to give, which I wasn't happy about, was on a food delivery platform where I was in the process of, I spent a lot of time looking for, let's say, a restaurant, then finally zeroed in on something, and I was just about to make my payment, and suddenly there's a pop-up of another restaurant, which by the way is one of my favorites. But then they don't let me skip the ad, right? They are basically I have to watch the ad for X number of seconds. Now think about it. For the food delivery platform, it's a win-win. So either I get annoyed and I take a premium service, or they get money from the advertiser, right? But the advertiser, which is a restaurant that I love, actually did not uh, really score well in that process with me, right? Because I would have, in that journey of me discovering what I want to eat, it should have come earlier, not when I've made the decision and I'm making a payment, right? So I think it's very important, not just for in this case, the delivery platform, but also the advertiser themselves to think, when do you want to advertise? Who do you want to advertise to? If I am a frequent user of, I get a lot of food from the restaurant, probably doesn't make sense to introduce the restaurant to me, right? Probably the mode of advertisement should be different. The other end of the extreme, where I absolutely love the way people are experimenting with OTT platforms in this case, is the way people are positioning brands as part of stories, right? I absolutely love the way Little Things. I don't know if you watched the show Little Things on Netflix. It started off in Filter Copy, which is again a great platform for small short form content. It's a sweet story where they very intelligently position brands as well, right? And it's so intuitive. You don't feel like it's an advertisement. You don't feel like the brand is being pushed into your face, right? So I think the fundamental part here is to understand who are you targeting and what will you get out of it, right? I don't think advertisers should just scramble for a platform and use it without understanding how that will benefit them. So I think the fundamentals shouldn't be forgotten while leaving room for experimentation, because think about TikTok, right? I mean, of course now TikTok isn't around in India, but when it was here and it was a craze, imagine how intelligently and differently brands were experimenting with advertising on TikTok, right? So I think two advices rather than three. Stick to your fundamentals while figuring out who you want to deliver, what you want to deliver, but be ready to experiment on the kind of format, right? Because again, OTT, when I say OTT, I would consider it in a very broad format, because as an AI company at Mylan, our focus is not just on OTT the way we define it in media entertainment, but anything where there's video streaming, right? So I do think that experimentation has to happen while keeping the fundamentals of who you are targeting. Don't forget that at the end of the day, there is an intent to get something out of this activity, right? So I think that's what my advice would be to advertisers looking to get into OTT platforms or any digital platform for advertising.
OTT was one thing that actually picked up in the last quarter. But
Yeah.
according to the trends, there were so many more that were supposed to pick up in 2020, right? Like chatbots,
Mhm.
voice search, conversational marketing, hyper personalization. Has it picked up at all? I mean, from the data that you see on a daily basis, what is happening there?
I do think all of them are happening at different pace. Depending on, of course, one very interesting thing I was thinking is that while predictions happen, keeping a lot of things into account, what you don't realize is everything can change. When predictions were made, in 2018 or 2019 about what's going to happen in 2020, nobody thought of coronavirus, right? So, so we can make all kinds of predictions, whether it's economic or market-driven predictions. Some of them will come true, some of them won't. Having said that, I do think, for example, voice is getting popular. Chatbots, of course, many of these trends are silently happening. We don't realize, but today, if you go visit any website, at least this is my personal experience, at least 70 to 80% of them would have some format of a chatbot available, right? Voice, of course, had a lot to promise. The research and the predictions said that by 2020, 50% of people would be using voice search. Of course, the jury is still out where it is, but at least from what we see around us, that may not be there yet. I mean, I don't use voice that often, right? My husband does, on the other hand, so maybe that's 50%. I'm not sure, but I do think some of these trends will take longer. But the pandemic itself has pushed some of these trends to happen faster, right? So they are at different stages. I don't think any of these have gone away, the ones that you've mentioned. They're at different stages of reality. Hyper personalization definitely is something where a lot of big players are putting a lot of effort. Think about the Netflixes of the world, right? I mean, the kind of recommendations that you're getting, it's getting better and better. Again, AI has a very important role to play. And I think there the future is not just on the cloud, but what can you do by actually sitting on the user's device? What kind of insights you can generate, while of course keeping in mind privacy, because while all of these trends are happening, the other very very big trend that you need to keep in mind is data privacy, the ask for data privacy, right, and the laws around it. So I think it's going to evolve. Some of it will happen faster than the others, but I think all of the different aspects that you mentioned are happening. Hyper personalization, voice, chatbots, everything is happening, and and especially in, for example, in voice and in chatbots, I think vernacular is happening quite a lot, right? A lot of focus on making sure that people don't just get to interact in English, but also in the language they're comfortable in, especially in India. And India is leading the path in that, I feel.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. In fact, the other day I was just attending a webinar on WhatsApp marketing, and they were talking so much
Yes.
about chatbots and AI powered how they can actually converse. But they were also talking about how you need to know at what point you have to switch from being a bot to a human, because it really gets frustrating over a period of time if you're trying to ask the same question and the bots are like, yes, this is the answer, we have it right in the back end, and we're pushing the same answer. So that's something that,
Exactly.
yes, we'll have to
Yeah.
crack over a period of time. um,
Yes.
Aditi, we've spoken about video, we've spoken about voice. So I want you to introduce me and our viewers to voice data and video data and sensor data. What exactly is this data? How is it measured? And how can we use it as digital marketers?
So, Mansi, the interesting thing about video data, voice data, or even sensor data is that it is an unstructured form of data. So, if you think about the way the world has looked at data and analytics for a really long time, it's been on structured data. What is structured data? When you create cohort, when you're using Excel sheets to create, let's say, analytics around cohorts, around payment, around multiple things, that's structured data. Anything where you can, in a very simple way, anything that you can put into an Excel sheet is structured data, right? Video voice is different because it's unstructured data. Video, for example, consists of pixels, right? And an individual pixel has no value, right? But together, all of those pixels and in those frames give a lot of meaning and value, right? So I think while digital marketers have been using data very very efficiently for a long time now, I think it's about time that we also start looking at unstructured forms of data and how they can be used differently. And I'll give you an example how even um, you know um, we may think that we're using unstructured data but not to the true value today. The example is that of recommendation. So think about how recommendations happen in an OTT platform, right? So today, let's say you as a viewer watched La La Land, and you get recommendation for a few other movies. The way that is happening on the back end is La La Land is being tagged, as let's say an Oscar-nominated movie, as a musical, as a movie having Ryan Gosling, and so on and so forth. And then there are AI algorithms or machine learning algorithms or other analytics that will help you understand which other movies are similar to these tags, right? Again, those movies also will have tags. So it's almost like you're comparing tags to tags, right? I have these 20 tags, which I'm comparing with the other 20 to see if it makes sense for me to recommend the other movie, right? But that's not how human beings think. When you recommend a movie, it's not because you have created 20 tags and then you're coming to me and saying, "Hey, Aditi, there are these 20 reasons, these 20 tags why you should watch this movie," right? A lot of the thought process is unstructured. It goes beyond just something you can put into a meta tag or a tag, right? So that's the direction where the AI and deep learning, which is a form of AI, is going to take marketeers, right? Deep learning, of course, has existed for a while, but it is very very mature now. because of the reasons that the technology has matured. There is more data available. There's more ability to handle this data efficiently. And deep learning, for example, can look inside a video and give you insights. For example, go beyond meta tags. Can you actually look inside a video and generate insights from the video itself instead of generating insights only from the tags which were created, to make the process simpler, right? So I think that's the future: the ability to use the content of the video, the ability to be content aware, right? The ability to use the video, voice, or sensor data itself instead of using proxies for that is where the future is going to be. And what digital marketers need to do is be open to that idea, is be able to of course, some of these trends will come in the next 2 to 3 years. Some of them might take slightly longer, but the ability to understand that there is so much more value that lies in the data itself rather than what is the definition of the data or the tag of the data, right? I think that's sorry, I got a bit technical there, but I just wanted to explain why I think that's an exciting field and everybody needs to take notice, because every marketer is dealing with some form of video or voice data, right? And how to leverage it better is going to be really, really important.
So now that we have spoken so much about data and the industry itself, I want to move on to the next section, where I want to explore a little bit about Mailin Foundry, where I want to understand a little more about what does the company do. Okay, so my first question, this
Right.
is the second section where we're going to talk about the company itself. What
Mhm.
do you do and how do you do it? I want to understand this how.
Right, right. So Mylin is an AI company. We are young, but we have a very, very experienced bunch of people who have come together to start the company. The vision was to basically create AI that can enable or actually transform the way viewers are experiencing content, the way personalization is happening, right? And we're trying to do all of this by using the power of the consumer's edge device. When I say edge device, I mean the device where consumer is, viewing content. So right now we're doing it on a laptop. We might be doing it on our phones at some other point in the day. We will be watching our television. There's so many different sets of devices that we use to create, consume, and interact with content, right? And we realize the value, like what I just spoke about, right? The ability to make sense out of all of that data being created and consumed today exists, but it is in a very nascent stage. It is going to be, completely changed and transformed by the way of using AI on the device. And the biggest reason for that is, while AI has evolved for a long time, the moment you are on the edge, on the consumer's device, you know what exactly the consumer is doing, you know what exactly are the challenges the consumer is facing, and how can you use AI to better those, right? So that's what we wanted to do as a company. The founders work together in Tata Group. So our founder and CEO is Gopichand Katragada, who was the CTO of Tata Group. He used to head technology for the entire Tata Group. And Ganesh, who's my other co-founder, and I used to work with Gopi in Tata Sons. And basically we spent a lot of time building tech and innovation for a group. And we understood a lot about what are those major trends and what are those major things that are going to disrupt various industries, not just media entertainment, but various industries. And Edge AI was one of them. And the reason why we thought we were the right people to do it, because we had two key capabilities. We had very deep understanding of artificial intelligence, especially things like deep learning and deep neural networks, which I just mentioned, right? So deep learning or deep neural networks are the kind of algorithms which actually mimic the human nervous system, the human neurons, right? Hence, it's called a neural network. And we are called myelin is because myelin is part of the human neuron. It's actually the protective sheath around a neuron. So just like artificial intelligence, especially deep neural networks are inspired by human intelligence and human neural networks, we are also inspired by the way biology works, and hence we are called myelin and foundry, because we think of ourselves as a foundry of innovative products and technologies that can help disrupt the way people are consuming content and people are interacting with content. Hence the name Myelin Foundry. And what we do currently is we work with a lot of media entertainment and OTT players to basically help them solve some of the challenges which they are unable to solve because they don't have absolute control over the last mile of the end user. So imagine, an OTT player puts in a lot of money, a lot of technology and effort to procure, build very, high quality content and also stream it, right? So for every video that you're watching, an OTT player is actually spending a lot of money to stream it to you, right? But what happens is because we are on a different network, right? We are on a telco network, we are on a Wi-Fi network. There is an absolute control that that OTT player has on the last mile, right? I mean, take our example right now. We are facing issues of the internet, and we're using Zoom, but Zoom does not have that control. Even if Zoom has put in a lot of time, effort, and money into building technology that can work seamlessly, but because I am in a last mile where my internet is not good, right? We are not getting the experience that Zoom would like us to get as users, right? So that's where we are using the power of the edge. We're using the device's power, right, to actually enhance the experience. To give an example, you can actually, let's say in this case, we would have had a better experience if the video could have been streamed at much lower resolution, much lower file size, so that there isn't buffering, there isn't pixelation the way we are facing. But on the device, we can actually enhance the video and we can give an HD experience. We can give a sharper experience, right? And that can be done by using the power of the edge device itself. So the dependency on the last mile goes away, right? So that's one of the problems we're trying to solve. But going forward, we also want to help get better personalization. Like I gave the example of recommendation, can you actually look inside a video and give insights on what is the user watching? What would they want to watch going forward, right? So that's what we are trying to do as a company. And of course, we are a young company, but we have a very strong team, and we're very excited about what value we can add in the space of video and voice, and of course other forms of unstructured data.
Perfect. I'll come to the clients part of it, but before that, now that you're talking about sitting on my device, okay, and looking at context and actions that
Yeah,
I'm taking from a device perspective, what about privacy issues? Because you're right there, and I'm
right.
right there, and you're
Yes,
talking about my
exactly.
behavior patterns, and you're looking into
Mhm.
something very deep of what I'm doing on my phone. So, what about privacy
Yes.
concerns?
No, it's a great point, Manasi. In fact, I think I'll just talk about Edge AI overall. Or on-device AI, as we say, the ability to do operations on device is actually something that will help the world deal with privacy better, because you don't need to send all the information. I'll give you an example, right? Let's take the field of insurance, right? Where a lot of insurance companies today, the premium that you pay to an insurance company depends on the score that you have as a driver, right? This is even true in more developed countries where they will be collecting data on how are you driving, are you braking a lot, are you driving smoothly, and on the basis, and they do that by using sensors on your phone, right, on your device, on your vehicle in some cases, right, and then they calculate a score, and that score helps you. Let's say if you're a good driver, you'll have to pay a lesser premium, right? While this is meant to personalize the experience of the user, there will be privacy concerns going forward, because I as a user may feel, hey, I don't want you to know the exact details of when I am braking. I don't want you to know that I went from point A to point B today, and I drove at this speed and I did this and that, right? Because as a user, I don't feel comfortable that I have to share this information with you. But I like the fact that because I'm a good driver, you are giving me a better premium, right? So I want the best of the both worlds. I want the personalization, but I don't want to give away micro details about what am I doing as a consumer. So here is where Edge AI can play a role, where you don't need to send all of the data. Today, what happens is, in order to do these personalizations and these operations, you need to send the data to the cloud, right? You're sending it to somebody's server, you're sending it to the cloud where these operations are happening, and then that score is being calculated, and then your premium is being set. Imagine now that you don't really have to send all of that data there. You do the calculation on the device. All that you send is the score. which is perfect for me. I have a good score. I want that. I want that as a benefit, but I don't want you to know as an insurance company when am I going where, what speed am I driving at, and so on, right? So I want it to be anonymized to some extent, but I do want the personalization, right? So that's where Edge AI will play a role, where a lot of operations where today the data needs to be taken to the cloud can be done on the device by using the power of the device, and what needs to be sent to the cloud can just be the information that helps the user get better personalization or better outcomes, right? So I actually I'm a firm believer that Edge AI is actually going to help solve a lot of problems that are going to creep up about data and privacy going forward.
Fantastic. I think that takes away all the concerns that we have, that you're going to take away everything I have. Um, so, coming back to the clients, what are your future plans? What is the value add that you give to your clients, and how is it going to improve over a period of time?
Right. So currently, like I said, we are working with some of the large scale OTT players, video conferencing players in India and abroad. The first value that you're offering is to just enhance the experience of the users. Like I said, right? So our AI sits on the device of users. We're not a B2C company; we are a B2B company. So to the end user, we are transparent. They don't see us. We are part of the OTT players app, but what we enable is the OTT to stream at low resolution, let's say, file size, but on the device, enhance the experience. So the user, on the one hand, always gets high quality experience, less buffering, smoother experience, while the OTT can actually tremendously save on their costs. Because if you're sending lesser data, lesser file sizes, you're actually spending less on the streaming, right? So that's the first product that we are, currently piloting with some of the large, like I said, video streaming players. But going forward, we are also excited to see how we can move towards the space of personalization, like I talked about. How can we also not just enhance the video, but also provide insights which can help personalization for the users, right? Make the cohort smaller, like I said, right? So why do you need to predict that these bunch of 1,000 people think alike when they don't, right? There are nuances. Every person is different, and there's a rise of individualism more and more, and people expect that to be respected, right? So I'm an individual. I have my own thought process. I don't want to be put into a group, and I don't want you as I'm your customer. I don't want you as my platform to just make predictions about me. Why don't you figure out who I actually am? That's what we are trying to build for OTTs. We also are very excited about newer forms of streaming like cloud gaming, which is again going to be very very big in the future. Gaming itself is becoming mainstream, and cloud gaming again makes it easy to democratize gaming, because today I'm sure everyone of us has a gamer friend, right? So people with either the PS4s and the Xboxes of the world, or with gaming PCs, right? Very, very expensive 4 lakh rupee PCs to be able to game, right? And the reason maybe a lot of us don't game because we don't want to put that much of investment into, hardware, which is going to cost us so much. But cloud gaming coming in can actually reduce the requirement, because that processing can happen on the cloud, and you can just, play on any device. You can use your mobile phone to play. You can use, your laptop to play, which is not a gaming laptop. But what this will create as a problem is that it's going to put pressure on the bandwidth, right? So the same issues will creep in. What we are facing today with a Zoom or a video conferencing call or an OTT platform will come for cloud gaming as well. So that's another space where we think that we can add a lot of value, because we can actually enable that in a much much smoother fashion.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, when you said videos, I only thought about YouTube and OTT because those are the only two things that I'm using. But now that I see the scope is so huge, so
Right.
Aditi, I'm very excited when you said how you collect data and not everything goes to the cloud, and how it's actually being
Mhm.
used. Like you spoke about insurance. So can you give us three
Mhm.
more scenarios where data can be useful in three different places, in three different domains, probably?
I think date. If the broader question is where can data be useful, I think everywhere. That's the simple answer. But even video data, traditionally, when we think of video, we just think of the typical consumer video, right? but video is used everywhere. I mean, even CCTV is video, right? Even CCTV and industry use cases of video where you're looking to use video to detect defects, to do predictive maintenance. So I think the definition of video is way, way larger, and that is also extremely fueled by the fact that there are so many more avenues to collect that data, process that data, right? Traditionally, what used to happen is, okay, let's just take the bare minimum because we don't know what to do with this data, right? But now, with a combination of very, very strong infrastructure to support the video and very, very strong analytics and AI to make sense of that video, it has just opened up. So the only advice, or the only sort of suggestion I would have to marketeers, and when I say marketeers, I don't just mean the B2C domain. I do think that B2B is another domain where just, and B2B2C, right? There's a lot of value for video. Just think about where can you what kind of video is being captured, how can that add more value, what kind of voice is being captured. Even email, think about email is an unstructured form of data, right? Because you're writing an email as a person, there's a conversation happening, right? So in B2B, for example, there's so much conversation that happens between a salesperson and a customer before a deal is closed, right? But when we capture it in the lead generation process, we just oversimplify it and we simply say, oh, okay, the lead was generated, a conversation happened, and the lead was dropped, or the lead converted. But imagine the amount of insights that are there in the email conversations that have gone back and forth between multiple people in the customer organization and multiple people in your organization, right? So I think not just video, but any form of unstructured data and the value it has is not restricted to just consumer industries. It is across the board. Just think through what are those data points. How can you utilize it better? There is a lot of it is evolving, but it is going to really really get there, right? So I think the important piece is to keep an open mind and treat everything as useful data, which earlier wasn't happening, right? So I think that's the one suggestion I would have, or advice I would have for marketeers in general.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it when you said that, look for it, look for it. There's video everywhere. Look for it. Beautiful.
Exactly.
Uh, Aditi, I see the passion in you. I see the fire, and I see the core competency. I see your hold over this field. So it's time to know a little more about you, because we have seen the industry and we have talked about what your company does. The section 3 will be all about you. So tell us something about yourself. Your academic background, your interests. Tell us more.
Sure, no, absolutely, Mansi. So, academic background, I think you mentioned that I graduated from London Business School. I'm an engineer by my undergrad degree. I did my electronics and communications engineering from IIT Guwahati. So I'm always an engineer at heart, and I always wanted to, uh, I always wanted to be the person that can take new technology to market. And hence, I while I had I had an engineering degree, I also wanted to get a management degree to understand how can you take products to market, right? How can you actually build a business around it? How can you actually add, uh, especially for innovative technologies, right? Because the biggest challenge is figuring out how do you monetize, figuring out how do you actually make value of something which is exciting and new, right? Hence, I decided to do a combination of engineering and management. And I spent some time, in the tech and innovation and strategy teams of the Tata Group, which again was very exciting for me because while all of us think of Tata as one entity, but it's actually not, right? I mean, there are 100 plus companies in the Tata Group, each of them selling different things, each of them working differently, and yet it is a conglomerate which, you know, comes together as a whole, right? So understanding how to look across industry, understanding how to look at macro trends out of what's happening is something I learned from my time at the Tata Group. And I think it's really helped me in forming a mindset of while, you need to really get hands on, you also need to be strategic about things, right? So that's how professionally I have grown. Personally, of course, I you mentioned I'm a big foodie. Me and my husband are big foodies, and we are. That's one of we always scout for the best places to go to, and that's something that we really love doing. We also love animals, We have a pet dog who we adopted from the streets, and he's really an essential part of our lives and who we are. But overall, I think we really love the nature. We really love animals, and if I weren't in tech, I would probably be. My husband often says, "You know what? I just want to do something where I can go into the wildlife and stay there. Is there a job like that where I can do that?" So I think we would love to do something around food. We would love to do something around nature and wildlife. So I think that's who I am, and also I love drama. I think you realize that from the fact that I'm quite dramatic in the way I speak. I I've done theater in college. I was very excited about it. Of course, after one point of time, some of it, you can't do it as actively as you want because life comes in. So, but I do love storytelling, theater, drama quite a lot. So I think that's who I am as a person.
I think that speaks volumes about the background and the interests and how you spend your time. What is your role in the company? What do you do at Merlin Foundry? Where how does your
Right.
day look like?
So I'm handling, in an early stage company, you have to wear multiple hats, right? Because you do not have the luxury of having all the resources you want in the world. You don't have the luxury of having all the people that you want in the world, right? So I wear multiple hats, but primarily, so I'm the head of marketing, and I basically look after the go to market for Mylan, right? Which includes, starting from what should be a go to market strategy, starting from the lead generation right up to actually working with that customer, right, and making things happen, right. So a typical day would be a lot of context switch, I would say. So in one meeting you're talking to a customer and you're explaining about your technology. In the other meeting, you're actually talking about how the product can improve, what kind of features need to change about the product. In a third meeting, you're talking about how can we position ourselves better as a company. What can we do from a PR perspective, from a branding perspective, right? So it's a lot of different things that I do on a daily basis, which is super exciting for me because I always say that I have learned more in this 1.5 years than I've learned in, like, I feel most of my professional life, simply because when you are an entrepreneur, you really, you have to do everything from scratch, and you really have to have that learning, right? So that's what I do on a daily basis. Of course, the company will evolve as we go forward. We'll get more people in the team. We'll have specific teams doing specific things. But right now, there are multiple things that we handle as a team.
Multi-skilled, always.
Well, you have to try, right?
Always.
That's when voice as an early stage company. I think the biggest learning is that you need to know how to wear multiple hats.
Other than when I look at this industry where there is data and AI, I see very less women in it. And I'm a part of a lot of companies when it comes to recruitment in the digital analytics industry or digital media industry. And when they even advertise for this roles like these, where AI is a part of it or digital analytics is a part of it, immediately they look for engineering as a background, or at least commerce, statistics, or some bit of maths as a background. One is, what is your opinion about women in this industry? And the second one is, what is your opinion about the certain skills that is required for this industry itself?
So I do think that yes, the number of women in digital has been low, but it is improving, right? And it's starting to show, right? Uh, just as an example, you look at the leadership in companies. You look at a webinar, a typical webinar, right? So a lot of webinars I attend these days do have a lot of women who are active participants, and adding a lot of value to these webinars. So I do think it is changing, and it'll accelerate even further with the fact that the industry is getting more flexible, with work from home becoming a norm during the pandemic. And I think it's going to stay, right? We're never going to go back to a scenario where we don't understand work from home. I mean, think about 6 months ago, there would be companies who would never imagined that work from home can happen, and now they're doing it. Everybody's doing it. So I think that will also enable a lot of women the flexibility that they need, especially in the mid stage of their career, when a lot of them have to juggle family and career. I think that's going to be a very important milestone, which is going to change the fact that we have less women in the workforce, especially in digital. So I think there again there are two very important trends to note. One is tools are there are more and more companies building tools that are user friendly, that are usable. So you no longer, for example, even to use AI, you don't really need to be an AI engineer, or you don't need to even be an engineer to use AI, right? Because there's a lot of focus on user interface, user experience, not just for consumers, but even for tools that are built for B2B, right? So I think that is going to make it simpler. You don't really need an engineering degree always to be able to do tech, right? And that's a very important evolution that's happening, and it's very important democratizing the way these technologies are being used. Second of all, in terms of skills in general, there is so much scope today to upskill yourself in different ways, right? um, all of the online platforms that give you certifications today, it is easy to get a certification from a university in the US without ever visiting it, right? You can use a Coursera, you can use so many different platforms to actually go and get a degree, get a certification, get whatever it needs for you to upskill yourself, even switch industries, switch functions, switch capabilities, right? So I think it's making it easier and easier, and I don't see this as a challenge anymore. I don't think you would need a few key set of skills. Having said that, a few the world will definitely move towards specialization, right? You don't need a background for that, but you will need to specialize even as a marketer, right? Because we've seen a lot of shift even in big corporates from looking for only generalist roles to actually looking for specialists, right? So that is happening, and for anybody to stay relevant, it's important to always keep up to date on what is important in your area of specialization. But I don't think that people would feel that their degree as an undergrad or a postgrad is going to be a problem anymore, because you can upskill yourself. You can, tools are getting easier for people to use. You don't need to be an AI engineer to be using AI anymore, right? So those are the key things that I see.
Awesome. I think that is going to boost the confidence for a lot of viewers who are not in this industry right now and who do not have a background in this industry right now. So, my last question in this section to you is a little personal. I know you've already answered this, but I want to know a little more about you. If you were not a part of this MarTech industry today, okay, what would you be doing right now?
So I think I can answer at a broad level and at a specific level. Specifically, other than marketing, product also really excites me. So I see myself, always be the bridge. I always want to be in an area where I understand the technology and I understand the market. So product is another domain, right? Where and actually to some extent, I do handle both product and marketing right now. But I always see myself as somebody who wants to, because I think I have generally a good sense of empathy. So I can understand a customer better. But I also, being from an engineering background and a very scientific mindset, I also understand technology. I understand what are the challenges. I understand what it takes to build something. So I always want to be in the bridge, right? Or rather the bridge between the two, because I think I bring that specific set of skills and capabilities to do that. But at a broad level, if I wasn't in Martech or tech overall, um, I think I would probably love to be in a consumer industry. So I've, like an FMCG or something which is very consumer facing, because I love understand. I really love consumer psychology. I really want to understand how do you think through from a B2C standpoint, right? I've got experience in B2B, but B2C excites me too. So I would maybe love to be in that space if I weren't in the space. And if not anything else, maybe I would just love to open a restaurant and just sell nice goodies to everybody. That's my third choice.
Lovely, lovely. It's a confluence of all the things that you said you are, Great,
Right.
awesome. So with that, we come to the fourth section of this episode. So what I did was about almost a month ago, I started this hashtag called Ask M. So I have put it out there where people can ask any question under the digital media space, and either I would get to answer it or I'll ask the specialist to answer it. So when I said that we're going to talk about AI, there were a lot of questions that came in. So I'm just going to put all that together and ask you a couple of questions in this section. So the first question is, what, according to you, are the key things that the digital marketeers should focus on in the next 6 months? That's till the end of this 2020, considering the pandemic
Mhm.
times.
So I won't answer it as an AI specific question. I'll just overall answer what I think is important, and that is uh, the ability to quickly pivot around what is important right now, because it is unprecedented times, right? I'll give an example of what I was thinking yesterday. So I one of my very close friends is moved in the same neighborhood as I have, and he's looking to buy furniture, right? So he comes to me and says, hey, I'm wondering. I mean, if it was a normal scenario, I would have gone to one of these big furniture brands and just looked at the furniture and picked up something, right? Because typically I want to look at what I'm buying, I want to touch and feel what I'm buying. But I'm also scared because I don't want to get exposure, right? Then I asked him, okay, why don't you go the online route? He said, yeah, but in the online, players, I'm not very sure if I'm buying what I see what I'm buying, right? I don't get that touch and feel. I don't understand if I'm buying the right thing. So I think this is an opportunity for both the offline stores and the online stores, right? For the offline stores to think through how can you redefine the way a user will be buying, right? Are there alternatives to how traditionally the user journey happens, right? In an offline furniture store. For an online store, they should consider that, hey, there are a lot more people who would have traditionally bought offline, but now they're considering online. So can we again think through the user journey and figure out where are those challenges in the pandemic times that we need to kind of convert to make it more accessible for the person to try out a furniture online without having to sort of go there. For example, augmented reality. I mean, there are brands that are using different forms of augmented reality to give that feel, right? A great example I love is for sunglasses and eyeglasses, right? The fact that you can actually upload an image and actually try it out and sort of and not just as an image but also as a video, right? As a 360-degree video. So I think the important part here is to again look at your user journey, look at where are the decision points changing because of the pandemic. Some of it will be temporary, it'll go back to normal after the pandemic is over. Some of it will not, right? So I think that's the key thing right now, and everything will revolve around that. I mean, I feel digital, AI, data, all of these are enablers, right? You cannot sell digital, you cannot sell AI. You're using AI to sell something, you're using digital to sell something, right? So I think that's the key advice I would have for folks who are trying to understand how to be flexible around the pandemic.
Thank you. I think that will tell us that, leave the technology aside. It will happen anyway. Let's use common sense. Let's look at, being empathetic.
And build the technology around it.
Right,
Yes, build
right.
technology, build relevant technology. Yeah.
Awesome. What are a couple of tools that every marketeer should always use for their marketing campaigns?
Okay. So I don't want to name tools, but I'll just talk about what are those key activities you need to do as a marketeer, which is very, very important, right? And the tool will really depend on which industry you are in, whether you're a B2C or a B2B, who are you selling to, right? It really, I do not think that there is any one size fits all kind of tool. Some of the bigger tools like Google Analytics, yes, is relevant for everybody in different formats. But I do think that again, just like I said, you need to build relevant technology. You also have to use relevant tools. But I think the first piece is just consumer analytics, right? So building the right kind of analytics for your consumer is important. And Google Analytics is the starting point. Who is visiting? you what are they doing and so on. But again, depending on the industry you are, there will be different analytics tools. But take data and analytics seriously. Make it part of your core strategy rather than just a thing to have on the side, right? It has to be a part of your core strategy. Second, of course, is to be able to choose the right kind of customer relationship management tool, right? Which will again differ depending on the kind of company you are. So there are a lot of tools like HubSpot, which are very focused on companies that where marketing is core, right? And then there are very sales focused tools like Salesforce. So it'll differ depending on which kind of industry you are. But it's important to have a tool that can give you that unified view and help you understand, the entire journey from lead generation to the point that the customer actually uses your product, right? I think these two are very, very important. Typically in tech companies, it is also important to have tools which give a product view, because the traditional sales marketing and tech with no confluence doesn't work for the tech industry. So you need products. For example, we use a tool called AHA, which is really exciting and a really good tool, which kind of fits together everything. It starts with what is your company's vision, strategy, how are you implementing the product, and how does it impact what you're doing in your marketing, how does it impact what you're doing in your tech development, right? So a unified tool, typically, if you have a product focused company, really helps because it bridges that gap. Otherwise, a lot of traditional companies have that issue that marketing is doing its own thing, and tech is building its own thing, and where do you bridge it, right? So a tool like this often helps in doing that as well.
Okay, with that, we come to the end of the Ask M series, the section under that. We'll move on to the next section, which is the rapid fire round, my personal favorite. It gives an insight to the kind of person I'm talking to. So let's start with this. I'm going to give you 2 or more options, and you'll have to pick only one. Okay, so let's start.
Okay.
Okay, the first one. When it comes to AI, Google or Facebook?
Google.
When it comes to partnering, Microsoft or Nvidia?
Microsoft. Tough choice. We partnered with both, and they are amazing partners. We worked a little more with Microsoft, hence Microsoft.
Neat. Okay, voice assistant, Google or Amazon?
Google.
Okay, marketing, social media or search engines?
It has to be a combination, but I would say social media.
Okay, when it comes to a writer, Stephen Covey or Stephen Hawking?
Stephen Hawking.
Okay, author, J.K. Rowling or Jeffrey Archer?
J.K. Rowling.
I've
grown up Harry Potter fan, so.
All right. Okay, when it comes to a city to live in, Bangalore or Mumbai?
Tough one, but Bangalore.
When it comes to a city to do business, Mumbai or Delhi?
I would say Mumbai because I've not done business in Delhi, so I'm unsure about how it is there.
Okay, video for brands, TikTok or Instagram Reels?
Instagram.
Okay, when it comes to video, YouTube or Vimeo?
YouTube.
Perfect. Nice. I think that round went really nice. Okay.
That was fun.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much. Aditi, I have one last question before we wind up. Okay. What, according to you, is the future of communication? We're talking about PR, advertising, journalism, marketing, all that which makes the communication industry today in the context of AI. Okay. What's the future for communication as an industry in the context of AI?
I just use one word to describe it. I think it's personalization for everything, right? Whether it is the kind of PR that you're doing, the kind of communication as a company, as a entity you're doing, kind of even PR. Actually, interestingly, I'm thinking today we do PR just with an intent to put ourselves out there, in a magazine, in a newspaper. But more and more PR will be focused on who do you want to reach from a PR perspective, right? So I think it's about personalization and relevant positioning for all of these areas that you're talking about, and AI will help bring that.
Thank you so much for your time, Aditi. With that, we come to the end of this episode. But do you have any concluding thoughts that you would want to talk about?
No, I think Mansi, it was an very very exciting program to be part of, and I think I've already spoken about what I think are the key things everybody needs to kind of consider as a marketeer. I'll just leave with a note, because I think I sort of work very closely with both the worlds, with technology and with marketing. The only advice or the last note I would want to put here is don't be afraid of technology, because often what happens is it's considered as this thing that's going to replace everything. It's going to take away jobs. It's going to AI and technology is going to just be something that will make people irrelevant, right? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's only going to enable think about the internet coming did not result in people losing jobs. It actually created so many more jobs, right? So I think that technology and forms of technology like AI need to be looked at in that fashion. They are enablers that help you reach more customers. They'll help you skill yourself in a way that you never could have imagined. So don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of AI. It's here to help.
Thank you so much, Aditi, for spending time with me and agreeing to be a part of my web series. I'm so glad I could speak to you and ask you so many questions.
Thank you, Mansi. Absolutely my pleasure.
This interview has given a lot of insights into the capabilities of AI in the field of communication itself. And this has also given insights into the capabilities of how people can actually take this up as a career, and those who want to shift their career for students and for working professionals. I think this has been a great interview. So I'm really glad you came in. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on my show. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. For those of you who are watching or listening to us, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and in some cases you have a very different opinion on how this spans through the future and what we've discussed today. So please leave your thoughts, opinions, questions in the comment section below, and I'm happy to take it up. And I promise you I will be answering those questions or getting it answered from Aditi. So thank you so much for watching and listening. You can also write to me on consultmanasi@gmail.com for more. That's consultmanasi@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. Have a great day ahead.